it's our tradition and culture. Vidhya, clean and green India, it's our tradition and culture. Would you be recording?
Good evening, Toastmasters. Yes?
Good evening.
I think it's quite obvious what I'm going to talk about, so without too much of introduction to the topic, I will directly jump into the speech today. Okay. So we know what all the environmental issues we have. I don't have to explain this too much. We know where we are. Our choices of lifestyle, the kind of patterns that we have with our production and consumption has greatly contributed to this. What we do in the form of innovation, invention, convenience are all, you see where it is. Are we doing anything about this or not? Yes, we're doing a lot. A lot of people are doing a lot of things, a lot of forums are meeting up in the world. They're coming up with a lot of frameworks, regulations to put things back in place. And most of this is reactive. Are we far away from this in India? No. We have similar problems. We are doing our best. Our government is doing its best. A lot of you know about the Swachh Bharat campaign. Many of you may or may not know about the constitutional regulations that we have to follow. But we do have some good things to talk about in India. So we have this India being the least wasteful economy. We have been appreciated by a lot of stakeholders in the way we utilize our things. The Green Dex, this is a score that National Geographic and Globescan have come up with. It's a ranking system where based on the patterns of consumption and choices that people make in certain countries, they have a certain scores. And India stands top, which means we are very good. And we particularly score good ranking for our choices of food, transportation and housing. Having said all this, it's ironic that in our country, when we have such issues, we're looking for solutions outside. When the easiest thing would have been if we simply look back into our own roots. Traditionally, our own Indian culture has sustainability as its core component. Our scriptures have underlined the necessity of sustainability and being close to nature. We have always talked about nature with a divine status. And why we raise things to divine status is the reason behind an Indian culture talking about anything in the status of divinity is simply because we respect it to that extent. Some small examples, there are hundreds of examples. What I could put on a slide were very few. Aparigraha is one of the yogic principles that we have, which talks about renunciation on a big level, but it majorly talks about the necessity of only taking what you want and not creating waste, having only what you need. Natural resources, all of us know, we literally worship everything, wind, water, flora, fauna, the banyan tree, the peepal tree, the neem tree, you name an animal and you have cultures worshipping them. Ayurveda and yoga is a part of the Indian cultural blood. I don't even have to talk about it. Kautilya in his Arthashastra centuries ago talked about preservation of biodiversity. And this concept is what he called as abharanya. Ishopanishad talks clearly about the kind of, the way each life form must enjoy what is there in nature but should not go beyond their limits and encroach into somebody else's necessity of the natural world. These things, these concepts developed in regions. It was very region specific. It came out of the necessities of certain regions and the natural flora and fauna that was available in that region, and these traditions came up from there to preserve what was there in that region. Unfortunately, at some point in time, the only frameworks that people followed were the religious frameworks, and so all these things got attributed to the religious frameworks. And so today, we talk about all these as blind beliefs. shun them away. Hundreds of traditions are there in the Indian culture. We can go on talking about them. Culture of hoarding. How many of us have kept plastic covers at home and reused them? Yeah? Newspapers. Everybody does this, right? Indian culture is one of the very few cultures, even though you're not below the poverty line, you will hand down your clothes to your sisters, brothers, at least in the past. Before we adopted a lot of Western culture, we used to do this. Yeah, our sisters and brothers used our toys, our clothes, cousins used it. Yeah, Indian culture is one of the only cultures that always tries to pick up a used cradle for a newborn. Okay, so these are all various things, that we used to do. And I saw this video on Facebook the other day. It talked about how Indians squeeze out the last bit of toothpaste from the, from the tube with the rolling pin, and it was ridiculed. But my dear friends, I ask you, we talk about reduce, reuse, recycle. Isn't this what we're supposed to do? Why are we ridiculing ourselves for this? We are not wasting. We are a least wasteful economy. And this is where it starts. From your toothpaste in your house, it starts. There is a store in London where they have these plastic containers, and they dispense the dal and the rice out of that, weigh how much ever they want to build it and take it, because they want to reduce packaging. Yeah? Oh my God, this was done for hundreds of years in India. We had pulses and rice available in sacks. Our grandparents used to pick it up, check the quality with their own hands, and then pack it and bill it. Today, we are into packaging. We have 1 kg packet, 2 kg packet, 10 kg packet. So we are adopting the Western culture. The West is adopting our culture and gaining brownie points for the same. We can talk about so many cultures. We know newly married couple planting seedlings. Where did this come from? Yeah, we can Kejari tree in Rajasthan. This tree is worshipped and protected. Do you know why? Because this tree can hold a lot of water, and in Rajasthan we know it's a desert. So these traditions didn't just crop up. But unfortunately, our ancestors, when they handed these traditions down, they forgot to tell us what was the reasoning behind. So we know there's a tradition. It has got altered in so many ways by the time it came to today, and we don't take the time to look back into why we are doing what we are doing. Yeah, and we call these things as superstitions. So my only ask to the audience here today is that let us put that little bit of effort to understand what is there in our tradition, because our tradition evolved in a very natural way, which preserved the balance in the nature. So let's go back to that and save our environment in the most traditional way possible. Thank you.